Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing a session. Of course it's live, but it will also be available to all those of you who can't attend live and want to watch this later. So I'm doing a session, as you can see. The session is on CAT prep from March, and a lot of you have been asking me, and this is something which is commonly being asked across the country by people who want to start their preparation at this stage. Am I too late to start, or can I actually take the exam, and can I start from March? And if I'm starting now, what are my most important things that I need to keep in mind? So in this short live session, I want to actually discuss this aspect with you. This aspect with you with respect to the process of preparation for CAT, and if you're starting in March. So that's we'll look at all the major aspects of your preparation process as we go there. And so coming back, so when you talk about CAT prep from March, please understand that the first couple of key things that you need to remember about CAT prep from March. The first thing is that it's approximately a 40-week timeline, give or take, a couple of weeks here or there. I've not counted it exactly, but approximately 40-week timeline ho gayi. And when you're talking about a 40-week timeline for CAT prep, this falls somewhere in between of long-term CAT prep and short-term CAT prep. Short-term CAT prep is where you are doing it in 25 to 30 weeks. Long-term happens when you do it over 50, 55 weeks, etc. So when you are doing a 40-week timeline, or when you're building a 40-week timeline for your prep, you're somewhere in between, right? And one thing you should understand about your CAT prep process is that CAT prep there are two parts to preparation. And you have to make time when you talk about this 40-week timeline. In this lesson, I'm going to give you a timeline to a week-by-week timeline, a month-by-month timeline of what you should be doing and what you should be executing in what month, etc. So one thing you need to, one heads up which I want to give you right here is that when you're talking about the two parts to CAT prep, you have to make space. You need to understand what these two parts are, and you need to make space for executing both these parts properly. So what are these parts? The two parts of CAT prep are ability, working on your ability, and working on your performance. So one thing that a lot of people make a mistake with respect to CAT prep is that they do ability for too long in their cycle of preparation. So if you're working on your ability, only you're working on your ability till August, September, and so on, then you'll be in trouble because you'll not have enough time to build your performance and to build your performance to peak performance levels. So this is like it's like an athlete. You work on your ability. Suppose you're a sprinter who's trying to improve or perform in sprint events in Olympics and Asian Games, etc. You first have to build your ability to run fast, but then you also have to learn how to actually do it on the day of the races and not make mistakes and not of going too fast or too slow during that race. So performance is something that you'll have to manage. Swati is asking me about LOD 3. I'll talk about that. Those of you who are not aware, I've started a session which I do late nights on the channel, which is called Arun Sharma Live Class. So usme I will be doing quants and DI and LR and verbal and reading and GK, etc. So we'll be doing that regularly across the year. So do follow the challenge. Do follow the channel for more content, etc. And those of you who have not subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel, because I'll be live regularly on the channel. So coming back, two parts to CAT prep: ability and performance. And essentially, you need to have a timeline available when you're preparing for CAT. You need to have a timeline where your focus is on ability. 80%, 90% of your focus is on ability improvement, and you also need to have a parallel timeline where your focus is on performance. So ideally, in a long-term prep scenario, now typically depends how quickly you can do your portion, etc. So obviously, when you're talking about doing your ability part, you're doing your portion in quants, you're doing your due diligence required in data interpretation and logical reasoning, and you're also doing the process required for the verbal and RC section. which will help you build your ability on those areas. And for each of these, the timeline that I suggest normally is between 16 to maybe for somebody who's good at aptitude by default, this can be as short as 16 weeks. But for somebody who's weak at aptitude or needs to do a lot of basic work either in quants or DI or LR or verbal, this timeline can be as long as 30 weeks. So this timeline varies between 16. Some people can also do, some outstanding people, extraordinary people can maybe also do it in around 12 weeks, but typically 16 weeks is a good timeline to take if you're fast at completing things. Otherwise, it can go if you're slow with the chapters in quants, etc., or you need many times, you need to keep coming back many times to your chapters, or you take a long time to complete a topic or a chapter, then in that case it can go as long as 30 weeks also. So I'll talk about this. So this is the problem. The problem is that if it's a 40-week period, you have a net of 40 weeks. The suggested timeline for performance, but by performance preparation I mean, or generally CAT preparation, it is meant that you are doing your you're doing your mock tests and you are giving enough time to do the mock test and then analysis and then coming back. So what happens is during this part of your journey of your CAT preparation, you're focusing mostly on ability. 80 to 90% of the work you do is on ability. The testing work, taking mock tests or taking sectional tests or taking chapter tests, is maybe just 10 to 20% of the work that you do. So if on a weekly basis, if you're spending, let's say 30 hours in your preparation, then 25 hours would be on ability improvement. You are dealing with some question type, some chapter somewhere or the other, and the remaining 5 hours maybe would be on testing, where you are taking a test or you are taking mock tests for chapters or specific parts of the portion. At Mindworks we call it the modular test series. So maybe 5 hours a week you do this, but the real preparation of CAT is here when you get to performance zone, and depending on whether you've completed this or not, you can have a twilight zone between the two. A twilight zone between the two would mean a timeline in between where you are 50-50 between ability work and performance work. But when you hit performance zone and when you hit your performance preparation for performance zone, at that time 80% of the work you do is basically taking tests and analyzing them. And then from there, it's actually a cycle. You take a test, you analyze the test, you work on the basics of what you feel you are inadequate with, and then you come back to your mock tests. So this is the performance zone. And in this performance zone, in the performance part of your CAT prep journey, you have to plan to take around 40 full-length mock tests minimum. At least if you're starting from March, that's the number you should look at. If I was talking to a group of people who are starting in July, I might tell them 20 mock tests, but a good number is 40 full-length mocks and at least 10 sectional tests. Right? Mindworks, of course, has a test series which we call as the Arun Sharma CAT Challenge, which is personally built by me. Those test series may give you that number of mocks and sectional tests which we want you to take. So, bina 40 mock tests or 10 sectional tests. By sectional tests we mean pura quants ka section ka ek pura exam, as if you are taking the exam, as if you are taking the quant section of the actual CAT. So at least 10 sectional tests each on each of the section. So which basically means that you need around 50. You need time during your performance zone. You need time to do around 50 full-length mock tests, which is 2 hours each. So 100 hours of test taking. Added to that, another 100 hours, 100 to 150 hours of analysis, and then you come back to your basics, how much basics you need to do. So what happens in your mock tests? So coming back to this part, and I will go into the individual sections and give you a timeline for each of these sections as we move on. But as I said, if you are spending 30 hours a week, if you are spending 30 hours a week here during your ability phase, you should be spending around 25 hours of those hours on the basics and doing the basic question types and chapters, and maybe 5 hours of of tests on the modular level, then the next phase of your preparation is split into two parts. One part where out of 30 hours a week you are spending around 15 hours doing the basics, and around 12 to 15 hours you are moving to mock tests and the test analysis and the back to basics. I call it the tab. Test yourself, analyze, and go back to the basics. Test, analyze, go back to the basics, and you keep going through that loop. So in this phase, in the first part of it, for performance phase, of the testing phase, you can split it 15-15 between how much time you're spending on the basics and how much time you are doing on the test and the analysis, and which basically means that if I'm assuming that you will take around 4 hours for a test, for testing plus analysis, and I'll do a separate video talking about the what you do for an analysis of mock tests, etc. So if you're doing 4 hours per test, if I'm talking about 15 hours, you're taking around 3 to 4 tests a month during this phase. And then later, as your need for the basics keeps going on, the last part of your preparation is where you are maybe spending 25 plus hours taking tests, which means you're doing around 6 tests a month at this part, and you are spending just 5-7 hours on the basics. So this is the last phase of it. So if you can spend a month of this, around 4 tests you'll be able to take, and if you can do around 3 to 4 months of this, you'll be doing 6 tests. And then last 15 days, 20 days, I mean once you hit November, last 15-20 days में जब तुम पहुँचते हो, तो then you can even 1 week before the CAT तक you can move to one test a day. Morning में test लिया, दिन में analyze किया, शाम को कुछ basics पे काम कर लिया, and so on. So you can have that cycle. As you keep going, right? So coming out of that, so if I talk about so my next message is now about the quants part. So quants mein, if you have my latest editions, I have divided the book into 5 blocks. Block 1 is the number systems and progressions part, and I'll do a detailed video of quants later, but abhi main timeline de raha hu tumko. Block 2 is the arithmetic part, which has 8 chapters. Block 3 is the geometry part, which is geometry, coordinate geometry and mensuration, 3 chapters. Block 4 is the algebra part, which is functions, inequalities, logs and quadratics. This is 4 chapters. And block 5 is permutation, combination, probability and set theory. So this is the counting area. The modern maths bolo ya counting wala bolo. I call it counting because these chapters are all built around counting structures. So these are the 5 blocks, and if I remind you of the importance, the area from which you will get the maximum number of questions, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4 are the areas in which you get the maximum number of questions. 2 is the heart and blood of CAT. The 8 arithmetic chapters is the heart and blood of CAT. You will find mostly everything from here, but other years mein, sometimes you have a preponderance of this, sometimes you have a preponderance of that. So block 1 and 4, the number systems part and the algebra part, become the second and third most important or the second most important areas. And then of course geometry has its own presence, you cannot ignore it. You will have between 2 to 5 questions on geometry in any exam. So the problem with not doing an area is, and I'll talk about this more when I do the QA prep strategy and I go into the chapter details, but since this is a generic class on CAT strategy, I'll be giving you the overall breakup of timelines for the block wise stuff. So the problem with suppose you don't do geometry and you go into the exam is a 22 question exam and 5 question geometry ke aa gaya, so you are down to 17 questions. You are solving the paper from 17 questions. और उसके बाद उस 17 questions में तुम्हारे जो chapters किए हुए हैं उसमें से tough questions आ गए, तो suddenly you are down to 13-14 questions and you got nowhere to go, because if you are targeting 15 attempts, तुमको वो 14 attempt question जो है वो भी तुम्हारा mind state of mind ऐसा हो जाएगा कि तुम जो आता है वो भी नहीं कर पाओगे, और जो chapters तुमको आते हैं उसमें से tough questions आ रहा है, तो every second question that you are coming across is a geometry question which you are leaving, and then the next question is a question from arithmetic which you know but the question is very tough. So it becomes a mess, which is why, at least at this stage, you have to plan to cover all the areas. So when you then talk about coverage of all the areas, you should try to create a timeline again. When you start your preparation, it's very important to have a timeline. Okay, what is my timeline for arithmetic? What is my timeline for arithmetic? What is my timeline for number systems? What is my timeline for algebra? What is my timeline for geometry? And I think I normally recommend this order for people to go ahead. At least at this stage, मेरा यही order recommendation होगा. And what is the timeline for the permutation, combination, probability areas? 3 chapters here. So to cut a long story short, to cut a long story short, we will be Aditya will create some mock tests etc. for all the Mindwork students, and we'll be giving you mocks. Don't worry. Abhi Holi ke immediately baad we'll be starting to release assignments as well as some live classes. I'm taking, of course, live classes in this format for the batch also. तो उसमें भी मैं questions उठा के अच्छे quality के questions उठा के लाऊंगा, and we'll solve it together. So anyway, coming back, so the thumb rule that you should have is on an average, remember this, on an average, what should be my number of chapters covered every week, right? So the thumb rule is 1 chapter per week. So your forward movement has to be 1 chapter per week. If you are a repeater, or if you are good at quants, maybe you can reduce it. This is the average that you should try to maintain. But if you are a repeater, or if you are good at quants, if I was preparing, I am good at quants, I might want to do it in 4 or 5 days for a chapter. And if I am weak and I am not good at maths, I might want to take it to 1.5 weeks. So on a day-wise basis then, you should be between a 5 to 10 day period. If you can maintain a 7 day per week per chapter, if you can maintain a 7 day per chapter timeline, you are finishing 20 chapters. You have 8, 2, 4, 3 and 3. So this is the easiest way to plan it. अगर तुम 5 day का plan करके चल रहे हो because you are strong at maths, at quants, or you are planning a 5 day thing because you are a repeater, or you are planning 4 day, तो तुम day 1 पे अपना timeline set कर दो. It's very important to do that because तुम्हारा timeline अगर set नहीं है, if your timeline is not set, everything is like चलो ठीक है आज ख़त्म नहीं हुआ कल करते हैं, कल ख़त्म नहीं हुआ 2 दिन बाद करते हैं. So it's very important to keep short targets for yourself. Don't have a target कि 4 महीने बाद 5 महीने बाद मेरे को complete करना है. You have to have short small victories embedded into the system. Otherwise you will start feeling very disoriented, and you start feeling that you are not connected to the task at hand. I always give this analogy that if you're planning, for example, if you're planning a weight loss period or a process of weight loss for yourself, don't plan 20 kgs. Plan 2 kgs at a time. Plan 2 kgs 10 times. Give yourself the benefit of the victory that you get out of losing 2 kilos, rather than trying to say that at the end of 2 kilos you still not won the battle. And if you start giving these small victories to yourself, you then get enthused to do the next part. You apply to anything, you will see that this works, right? So given this fact, if you are going with a 5 day per chapter, you should get this done in 40 days. And for 20 chapters, you should complete the whole thing in 100 days. If you're going 7 days, you should complete the whole thing in around 20 weeks. और 20 वीक का टाइमलाइन अगर बनाते हो, देखो एक चीज़ और उसमें, मेरे पास बहुत स्टूडेंट बहुत बार आते हैं कि सर मैंने ये टाइमलाइन बनाया था लेकिन 4 हफ्ते हो गए लेकिन मेरे 2 ही चैप्टर हुआ है. सो आई ऑलवेज टेल देम कि ठीक है तुमने 20 वीक टाइमलाइन बनाया है तो डज नॉट मीन कि 21st वीक हो जाएगा तो समबडी द स्काई इज गोइंग टू फॉल डाउन. इट्स नॉट गोइंग टू हैपन. सो इफ़ यू टारगेट अ 20 वीक थिंग एंड यू फिनिश ऑफ इन 24 वीक्स, काम तो हो गया ना, काम तो ख़त्म हुआ ना. You still have 16 weeks for performance work, and during that performance work of 16 weeks तुमको उन चैप्टर्स में वापस जाना पड़ेगा बिकॉज कैट प्रेप में अगर ये गलती करोगे कि एक बार पढ़ोगे और एज्यूम कर लोगे सब कुछ याद रहेगा तो इट विल नॉट हैपन. सो दैट्स व्हाई यू हैव टू कीप कमिंग बैक टू दीज टॉपिक्स, राइट? सो इट्स ऑल्सो इम्पॉर्टेंट देन कमिंग बैक के एक और फैक्टर हो जाता है कि अगर मैं चैप्टर का टॉपिक करता हूँ 7 दिन में टॉपिक, आई एम ट्राइंग टू डू द टॉपिक इन 7 डेज, 7 डेज में मेरे से बहुत अच्छे से टॉपिक नहीं होता है, तो मैं उसको 9 डेज कर देता हूँ लेट्स से, और तब मेरे को रियलाइज़ होता है कि 9 डेज में बहुत अच्छे से टॉपिक नहीं होता है। तो अगर मेरा प्लान में ये है कि मैं एक ही बार पढ़ने वाला हूँ उस टॉपिक को, तो मैं 20 दिन लगा दूंगा उस टॉपिक पे, क्योंकि मेरे को अच्छे से करना है उसको, राइट। I'll take 20 days to do that, right? But if you have this plan that you will come back to the topic again and again, 2, 3 times, 4 times during your preparation over the next 7, 8 months, 2 things will happen. One is you'll be able to exit the topic faster. कि ठीक है, जो नहीं हुआ अभी उसको मैं आगे के लिए छोड़ रहा हूँ. One. Second is you'll be more dependent on your own problem solving than on doubts. And third, which a lot of people make a mistake of, कि बहुत ज़्यादा डाउट क्लियरिंग पे डिपेंडेंट रहते हैं. And I tell my mind work students on day 1 कि डाउट क्लियरिंग पे उतना डिपेंड मत करो. 1 in 20 questions you can ask, but not, I mean, if you are a person who's always going for doubts, and every second question you asking doubts about, you will never build the problem solving capacity you require inside the exam. So you will not be able to clear CAT. मैट और सी मैट में तुम्हारा परसेंटाइल आ जाएगा, कैट में नहीं आएगा. जस्ट रिमेंबर दैट, राइट. सो 10th edition में LOD 3 you should, I think there are 11 or 12 chapters जिसमें LOD 3 है, and I would recommend you going to the LOD 3 of every chapter. Again LOD 3 करना है कि नहीं करना है वो डिपेंड करता है कि तुम, और LOD 3 फर्स्ट राउंड में मत करो, LOD 3 को बिल्ड इन करो, और I mean just imagine this, during your first 20 weeks, if you are taking a 20-week timeline, during your first 20 weeks starting from week 1, every week there is a pressure of a new chapter, right? You are bothered about कि ये chapter अभी ख़त्म करना है, अगले week ये chapter आ रहा है, so there is a lot of pressure coming in. But imagine this, I mean just understand this, in a 40-week timeline, once the new chapter coming up का pressure ख़त्म हो जाता है, तो after this you have got ample time to revisit all the chapters. So यहाँ पे the per week time, I mean for example, if you are picking up a new chapter during this time, a new chapter by default will be 10 to 15 hours. If you are doing a course, for example Mindworks का course कर रहे हो, तो 2 से 4 घंटा तुमको मेरे वीडियो मिलेंगे, 2 से 4 घंटा से 6 घंटा कोई टीचर का लाइव क्लास भी मिलेगा. अगर तुमको दोनों करना है तो 10 घंटे तुम्हारे क्लासेस में जाएंगे, फिर 15 घंटे तुम उसको सॉल्व करोगे, तो 25 घंटे का कमिटमेंट सीधा हो गया. और तुमको DI भी करना है, LR भी करना है, VRC भी करना है, right? So everything you have to do together, so that becomes a problem. So 15 minimum 15 hours तो क्लॉक है तुम्हारा every week with new chapters. और जैसे ही तुम्हारा फर्स्ट राउंड कंप्लीट हो जाता है सब चैप्टर का, तो वो 15 घंटा पर वीक तुम्हारा ओपन हो जाता है, फ्री हो जाता है. या इट विल गेट रिप्लेस्ड बाय सम टाइम फॉर टेस्ट टेकिंग, but test taking is also revisiting the chapters. You are in a way revisiting the chapters from that during your test taking also, because you will be getting questions from all chapters during your test taking. So don't get too perplexed. First of all कि 20 वीक के बदले 23 वीक में ख़त्म हो रहा है, 24 वीक में ख़त्म हो रहा है, and hence you will not create a target. So have a target, and just like quants में इस तरह का target होगा तुम्हारा, data interpretation और logical reasoning में you need to understand, and I'll do a separate video of DI and LR for CAT 23, DI and LR from March, but I'll give you the basic logic here. In data interpretation and logical reasoning, your ripeness of a preparation, and जैसे quants में क्या है कि तुम्हारा 12 चैप्टर हो गया, तो you're a riper mango than somebody who's just starting off, right? किसी का 18 चैप्टर हो गया, किसी का 20 चैप्टर हो गया, और सेकेंड राउंड में 5 चैप्टर हो गया. That guy is a riper mango. His ripeness has increased. He's reached a point where he's far ahead in the preparation cycle from somebody who's doing a 3rd chapter for the first time, right? DILR में the measurement of ripeness is in terms of your problem solving experience. It is not in chapters, because DI में तो chapter होते भी नहीं है, LR में भी chapter नहीं होते हैं, question type होता है. So if you're trying to study chapters in LR, you are doing something wrong. Or if you're trying to study chapters in DI, you're doing something wrong. So it's about problem solving experience, and you have to have a target. Keep a target of around 15 sets. By sets I mean, some people ask me this question all the time कि 15 question करने कि 15 set करने. So remember 15 set करने every week. So keep a weekly target of 15 sets in DI, 15 sets in LR. This is the ambitious target, because if you can do this, by the 15th week you will be at 225 sets of DI and 225 sets of LR. And एक थंब रूल है DI-LR का कि 200-300 सेट में अगर DI और LR नहीं सीखोगे तो ज़िंदगी में कभी नहीं सीखने वाला. If you're not got better after 200 sets, you'll never learn it. So you need to re-look at what your process of learning is. So in DI and LR, your measurement has to start from day one. And please remember this, a lot of people, what they do is that in this timeline, when they are doing all this, they don't do any DI and they don't do any LR. पहला 10 हफ्ता. अच्छा, एक चीज़ और, इसमें 1 वीक पर चैप्टर, लेकिन कुछ चैप्टर जैसे यहाँ पे नंबर सिस्टम चैप्टर है, यहाँ पे टाइम स्पीड डिस्टेंस चैप्टर है, यहाँ पे फंक्शंस का चैप्टर है, यहाँ पे ज्योमेट्री का चैप्टर है. These chapters take a little bit more time, so they are 2-3 week chapters. But that is offset by the fact that some chapters are 2 days also. For example, time and work here, interests here, can be done in 3 days, even by somebody who's taking a 7-day period. So that's why I said your average should be 1 chapter a week. That's this thing. And if you want to increase it to 1 chapter every 5 days or 1 chapter every 10 days, that's up to you. You can adjust according to your learning process and your learning cycle. So what a lot of people do is that during this first 10, so ये अगर 11 weeks में तुम plan करते हो, तो first 11 weeks में कोई DI-LR नहीं कर रहे हो, which is a cardinal mistake, because तुम एग्जाम में जब जाओगे तो तुमको 3 सेक्शन मिलने वाला है. You're going to get 3 sections: verbal, DI-LR in that order, and quants. और तुम जो quants का प्रिपरेशन साइकिल चलाए हो 40 वीक्स के लिए, और वर्बल का प्रिपरेशन साइकिल चला है 40 वीक्स का, और DI-LR का प्रिपरेशन साइकिल अगर तुम्हारा सिर्फ 15 वीक लॉन्ग है, तो तुमको ये वाला काम और वो वाला काम यहाँ पे हेल्प नहीं करने वाला है. फॉर द 40 मिनट्स दैट यू गोइंग टू सॉल्व DI and LR, only that time will help you, which you have been giving for DI-LR during your preparation. So when I say 40 weeks of timeline, it has to be 40 weeks of verbal preparation, it has to be 40 weeks of quants preparation, it has to be 40 weeks of DI preparation, and it also has to be 40 weeks of LR preparation. So treat DI and LR as 2 different subjects. Give a little bit of time, give less time. मतलब 15 set, मतलब when you're starting off, you'll obviously pick up the easier sets. If I'm talking about 15 sets of DI and 15 sets of LR every week, on an average 10-15 minutes लगेगा तुमसे एक सेट करने में. तो बेसिकली 3 घंटे की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं. ऑन DI 3 घंटा इन LR एवरी वीक. क्वांट्स में तुम 15 से 20 घंटे दे रहे हो एवरी वीक फ्रॉम वीक 1. DI में 3 घंटा देना शुरू करो, LR में 3 घंटा देना शुरू करो. हफ्ते में एक ही दिन करो DI और एक ही दिन करो LR, बाकी पूरे हफ्ते क्वांट्स करो. बट देयर हैज़ टू बी सम फॉरवर्ड मूवमेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ हाउ मेनी क्वेश्चंस यू हैव. And of course, when I talk about 15 sets, I'm talking about trying 15 sets. You should go through a trial of 15 sets. It might happen in a week that out of the 15 sets you tried, you solved only 8. In the next week, maybe you solved only 12. That's okay. It's perfectly okay. Just like in quants, I want you to try around 150 to 200 questions a week. 150 to 200 questions try करोगे तो 100 to 120 भी solve होगा. तो that's okay. कुछ लोग बहुत weak हैं तो 200 question try करोगे, 60-70 question ही solve होंगे. You're still moving ahead. So just remember that factor. We are not talking, when I talk about 15 sets a week, I don't mean that you have to solve 15 sets a week. And of course, if you're doing a course or you have got some other resource available, then part of these 15 sets initially can also be assisted problem solving. That means you're watching a video or doing it through some solution of books, etc. So coming back to the last part, ठीक है? Coming back to the last part, अक्षय तुम्हारा जो question है वो मैं अपने LR DI के क्लास में लूँगा when I talk about LR DI from March. So coming back to the last part, verbal RC. Verbal RC में capacity building, ability building is mostly about reading, vocabulary, and phrasal verbs and sentence comprehension. 4 things you have to focus on: the ability to comprehend sentences, idioms and phrasal verbs का list, vocabulary development, and your reading skills or your practice of reading. Or I'm doing a lot of reading on the channel, so do follow my videos. I keep trying to help you improve your reading capacities, etc. So those of you who have not subscribed, please do subscribe. So ये 4 focus, ये capacity building में ये 4 focus करते हो. और जिन लोगों का already ये चारों ठीक है, तो then in your first few months you can actually just do a little bit of maybe just 3 to 5 hours of verbal. Otherwise, अगर verbal में 10 से 15 घंटा लगा रहे हो initially, तो first during a capacity building time, you have to spend 80% of your time doing these 4 things. And if you don't need this, those of you who belong to convent educated have been reading a lot right from childhood etc. तुमको नहीं लगता है कि तुमको इतना ज़रूरत है reading का, तो in that case your preparation time just requires 3 hours of practice from time to time. So in that case you get a lot of free time to upgrade your DI, LR and verbal and quants preparation. And those of you who are good at quants can take some time from there and bring it into your verbal and increase that if this is a problem. तो LR verbal में अगर तुमको ये चारों चीज़ आ गया तो क्वेश्चन सॉल्विंग इज़ नॉट सच अ बिग इम्पॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट. जैसे क्वांट्स में क्या है, टाइम स्पीड डिस्टेंस में मैंने 400 क्वेश्चन सॉल्व किए हैं, तुमने 100 क्वेश्चन सॉल्व किए हैं, तो मेरा टाइम स्पीड डिस्टेंस तुमसे बेटर रहेगा नॉर्मली ऑलवेज, राइट? जस्ट सेकेंड, जस्ट बैक. My time speed distance will be better than you if I have solved 400 questions. So 2 students who start at the same level, one person starts at solves 500 questions of a topic, and other one has solved only 100 questions of a topic. The guy who solved 500 questions will be better than the guy who solved 100 questions. Verbal में ऐसा नहीं होता है. हम लोग का स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट सेम था. मैंने 100 आरसी किए, तुमने 500 किए, does not mean कि तुम्हारा आरसी बेटर होगा मेरे से, because it's not, I mean, learning through problems is not such a big aspect of verbal. Just remember that. So what you have to learn is basically this, and the key is the ability to comprehend sentences. So as I show in my Read and Learn series, which some of you are watching and following, I show you, I mean, in real CAT passage you get 60 word long sentences. उसका subject, predicate, object कहाँ पे किधर कब से change, कब कहाँ change हो जाता है, समझ में नहीं आता है. So once you get a hang of how to handle 30, 40, 50 word sentences, then the CAT can't hurt you. और तुम्हारा comprehension ठीक रहेगा तो तुम्हारा आंसर अपने आप निकलता है verbal में. So that's going to be the process of what you should adopt for your verbal and for your CAT prep. So create that timeline, and again in verbal also, since reading is non-accounted for normally, it's better for you to have a number that you put yourself under, or a structure under. So you can start with a 5 article per day or a 10 article per day. जैसे DI में I told you that you have to have a target कि 15 passages, 15 sets I have to solve in a week. तो per day target तुम एक बना लो, and 5 articles per day or 10 articles per day that you will do. And I'll do a detailed session on how to improve your English and your verbal as we do more of this. But keep a target of this, either this or that. Create a target, and you try to, again, creating a target does not mean कि तुमने किसी दिन 7 ही किया तो आसमान गिर जाएगा तुम्हारे ऊपर, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होगा. Even if you're doing 7, keeping a target of 7, 10 and doing 7 is better than keeping a target of 5 and doing 5. So keep an ambitious target of number of articles per day, and just try to make sure that you get as close to this as possible on an average on a daily basis. और इस आर्टिकल से जो तुमको वोकैबुलरी एंड ऑल मिलता है उसको तुमको याद करना पड़ेगा. So this is the basic structure. So once you create that timeline, let's say you're starting on 10th March to 70, and you have a 1 week timeline. The 17th March is your timeline for the average chapter in quants. It's also your timeline to finish 15 sets of DI practice, 15 sets of LR practice. It's also the timeline for finishing 60 to 70 articles of reading. और एक लास्ट पॉइंट, आर्टिकल्स का जब करते हो तो क्या होगा कि तुमको वेरिंग लेंथ के आर्टिकल्स मिलेंगे. तो इफ़ यू, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ़ यू गो ऑन टू EON, you get articles which are 3,000, 4,000 words. So when I say 10 articles a day, I don't mean 4,000 word articles, I mean 800 word articles. So if you are going through a EON article of 4,000 words, you count that as 5 for the day. So be happy with that, and I'll wind up and I'll come back again for more. Thank you so much. Do comment on the video, and do subscribe to the channel, and do press the bell icon. Chalo, thank you so much. Bye.